You have three approaches to IHRM. Cross-cultural management, IHRM in the multinational context, and comparative and industrial relation systems. These approaches are different approaches on how you can manage your human resources. We will deal with this one by one as you progress the course. You have offshoring versus outsourcing. These are again very, very important keywords. In other words, offshoring means getting work done in a different country. And outsourcing refers to contracting work out to an external organization. Now, if you simply say from India, if you want a certain task to be outsourced and you give that task every time to a company in Sri Lanka, that would be called as probably outsourcing. But if you say that, see, now let's take an example of outsourcing and offshoring to make things more simple. Now, offshoring, and we should understand one thing, they are always dealing with a different country. Okay. Now, in outsourcing, we can say that they are just outsourcing one particular activity, contracting one particular activity to another country for a short-term purpose. Why do we need IHRM? In other words, what is the necessity of having IHRM as a subject? You can see these points, but let me explain these points with the help of an example. Now let's say one of you has got a job in United States of America, you're placed in Washington DC, you go there. Different country, new people, new set of experience. In your team, you have people of different cultures. Probably you have a Chinese nationality, you have a French nationality, you have a Pakistani nationality, and you. So totally there are 4 of you, people from different parts of the world. Now, how will you interact with each other? First striking difference, cultural diversity. Your cultures are different. Second, workforce diversity. Now, how you work in one particular country or how you're used to working may not be the same in other parts of the world. Take an example, an American and an Indian. In America, you have extremely informal structures. In India, we still follow a lot of formal structure. There's going to be an imbalance. We are not going to understand each other's culture. So there is diversity in the way work happens, the workforce. People have different backgrounds. Language diversity. In China, people speak Mandarin. They're very comfortable with Mandarin. And now, if you are exposed to different languages, they would have an issue. You would have an issue in understanding their language. French are very comfortable with French. Fortunately, we can manage with English, but we also have our own language preferences. Different languages, economic diversity. One may be extremely rich, one may be not very rich, one may be average. How do you deal with all of them sitting in one table, discussing one issue, having one objective, and that should lead into one result? You need IHRM. You have IHRM functions. What is the difference between HRM functions and IHRM functions? A lot of things you do not have to look in HR, like the adaptability, like the cultural preference, all these aspects, language has to be looked in IHRM. So you will have basically 4 important IHRM functions. Recruitment and selection, who you're recruiting to go to another country. Training and development, are you training them enough? Are you giving them the skills that they need to go to another country? What is their compensation? You cannot be giving them the same salary that they're getting here. Why would they leave their country and go? That has to be worked upon. And how do you manage with expatriates? A person going from India to another country, you have to know how to manage them. And this is where IHRM plays a significant role. Now coming to probably the most interesting and the most diverse part of the first module, culture. Culture, in other words, is a sum of attitudes, values, beliefs, and customs. What is right for me may not be right for you. What is perfectly acceptable for you may not be acceptable for me. who do we blame? No one to blame because of our cultural backgrounds. In IHRM, we have one model, Hofstede's cultural framework, and it is extremely important for us to know what is Hofstede's cultural framework to deal with IHRM. Now, if you look at it, Hofstede has identified 5 very important factors, or in other words, cultural dimensions. Power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, and time orientation. Let us study this one by one. Power distance. If you look at power distance, each country has different ways that they deal with this particular concept. Let's take an example of Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom. Saudi Arabia has very high power distance compared to the United Kingdom. In other words, you literally have to respect your boss in Saudi Arabia, whether he's right or wrong, but in UK you have the freedom to tell your boss that, boss, you're wrong. This is the basic power distance. This is applicable for both the organizations and family structures. In India right now, we are slowly moving from a high power distance to an average power distance. I don't think we will reach the low power distance in any time soon. So the difference, basically we took 2 examples, Saudi Arabia and UK. UK is more relaxed, you can tell what you feel and there's not much of power distance, whereas in Saudi Arabia there's a high power distance, in other words, high hierarchy. Moving to uncertainty avoidance. What is uncertainty avoidance? How much of risk are you willing to take? How much of uncertainty are you actually trying to avoid? India has a very high uncertainty avoidance. We as Indians can deal with uncertainty. But if you go to some other countries, whereas some European countries, they cannot deal with uncertainty avoidance. They want everything to be black and white. Again, a very important cultural dimension. Your major decisions can change because of this. You wouldn't want to experiment if you feel that you cannot handle uncertainty. Individualism versus collectivism, the third factor. Let us take an example, say, of any of the Middle Eastern countries, let us say Iran, and let's take an example, let's contrast it with United States. The Middle Eastern countries, namely Iran, is very collective. You're very family oriented. You want to take care of your family members. You look at their priorities over your priorities, which is extremely which is different in US. US, you're very individualistic. Your happiness, your priorities comes over the other person's. So this is another major factor. Apart from that, you have masculinity versus femininity. Masculinity is associated with the aggression, how aggressive, how ambitious a country is. Some countries are extremely aggressive, extremely ambitious, like Japan. You want to go, you want to achieve. Some countries are more laid back, more feminine, more peace-loving, like Poland. Last one, we have time orientation. Time orientation is how much of the future are you looking at? Are you looking at short-term orientation? Are you looking at long-term orientation? Short-term orientation is when you're just living for tomorrow. Again, the European countries, the American countries, you probably live short-term. People have the tendency of earning in the week and spending it over the weekend. But we Indians, would we dare do that? No. You have people saving all their lifetime because we look at long-term orientation. They look at short-term orientation. These are the 5 cultural dimension factors that determine how a person is going to survive in another country. If you take a person from an extremely low Hofstede cultural framework, if they are low in all aspects, and you move them to a completely different country where they are high or they are opposite to these dimensions, he will have a problem. So it is therefore absolutely essential to be aware of this and train that expatriate step by step in each of this dimension so that he does not have a problem when he goes to that country. Last, organizations that use Hofstede's cultural framework in their cross-cultural training. Google, Amazon, McDonald's, the list goes on. But the point is, many multinationals use because they know that how important it is for an employee to be comfortable in the place he's working in. Last I'm going to talk about 3 very important concepts which is going to go with you throughout your journey in IHRM. Let us start with what is an expatriate. A parent country national sent on a long-term assignment to the host country for operations. For example, we take an example of Infosys, let's stick to that. An Indian who's working in the Bangalore division of Infosys is sent to the US subsidiary for a long assignment. He is called an expatriate. Now, if that Indian comes back to India, he will be called a repatriate. Okay, because the same Indian comes back. Now, what is an impatriate? A host country national or a third country national assigned to the home country of the company where it's headquartered. What do you mean by an impatriate? You have a third country national assigned to the home country of the company where it's headquartered in. So that is what an impatriate is. These 3 differences have to be understood to move ahead with IHRM. We've already discussed on who is an expatriate. This is probably a model that you can see on how the dynamics between who is a PCN, who's an HCN, who's a TCN. We've already dealt with this extensively. So I'm just leaving it to I'm giving you time so that you can look at this picture and place it very clearly in your mind as who is an HCN, who is a TCN, who's a PCN, what do they mean by these terms? The last one is the differences between domestic HRM and IHRM. Let me simplify it and talk about the basic things. You have first as business activities, you have taxation policies that will differ. The complexities would differ. The complexities would include currency fluctuations, foreign policies. In IHRM, you have more involvement and the employee mix is going to be very, very complex, leading to more risks. And what are the variables that moderate domestic and IHRM? You have cultural environment. I think we discussed about Hofstede's cultural framework. You have the industry. Then you have different other parameters that moderate these differences. But mostly, you have to understand the cultural environment and the industry along with other categories. You have like the reliance of the multinational on the home country. You have attitudes of senior management. You have the complexity. All these moderate the difference between domestic HRM and international HRM.